Hello, I'm Jeff Keshin, the President and Vice Chancellor at the University of Regina. We're situated in Treaty 4 territory with a presence in Treaty 6. The University of Regina has joined the Government of Canada and other organizations across the country in observing the first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation on September 30th. It's a day for all of us to reflect on Canada's relationship with Indigenous peoples and to recognize the utterly tragic role that the residential school system played and it continues to play in intergenerational trauma in our country. It's also a time to remind ourselves of the role we must all play in our collective journey towards reconciliation. The University of Regina is committed to truth and reconciliation through our teaching, our research, our learning, and our service to the community. This commitment is an integral part of our strategic plan, and as an institution, we have made the collective commitment to move forward on all the truth and reconciliation of Canada's calls to action that are relevant to our post-secondary education. We're so fortunate that earlier this year, Laurie Campbell joined the University of Regina as our first Associate Vice President, Indigenous Engagement. Let's now hear from Laurie by pausing to consider and to commemorate the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation is so important for our university and for our country.
Tanse, Nia Laurie Campbell. I'm a Two-Spirit Nehio, Pitago Sasana and with band membership at Montreal Lake Cree First Nation. And I have the honor and privilege of fulfilling the inaugural role of Associate Vice President, Indigenous Engagement at the University of Regina. There's huge significance in the establishment of the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. The TRC released its final report and calls to action in 2015 and included a call for the federal government in collaboration with Indigenous peoples to establish a statutory holiday, a National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, to honor survivors, their families, and communities, and to ensure that public commemoration of the history and legacy of residential schools remains a vital component of the reconciliation process. So September 30th is a deliberate act by the federal government to respond to the work of the TRC, recognizing and honoring the horrific lived experiences of Indigenous peoples who attended the residential schools and the legacy of trauma that is very much so present today. Our elders have talked a lot about that before we can reconcile, that we need to know the truth, that everybody in Canada needs to understand and acknowledge the truth of what occurred in relation to the residential schools. And one thing that I've learned is that in Indigenous languages, there is no translation for that word reconciliation. And many that provided testimony during the TRC voiced their concerns even about the word. And, as many of you speak other languages know, language is so important and some concepts don't translate in the same way. And that affects the meaning and the outcome of how we can respond to different things. So reconciliation means, essentially that things were good at some point and then they went bad and now they need to be reconciled. So you can think about that in terms of, being in a relationship. Everything's good at the start. You maybe have a disagreement and then you reconcile or you make up. But Indigenous peoples didn't experience the good part of engagement with settlers who came to colonize Turtle Island. So you can see how the word reconcile doesn't really make a lot of sense. I've heard from one of my elders that a better word is Quaiskastasuan, which is a Cree word, and it means to put things right. So now that the TRC and the Missing and Murdered Indigenous and Women and Girls Inquiry and many other inquiries are complete, it's up to Canadians to be accountable for their own learning. And the resources are there. That's the truth part. Then it's also up to everyone in Canada to take action and to put things right. And the calls to action provide the framework for Canadians to take action to put things right. The University of Regina as a whole plays a big role in our province. And so first and foremost, everybody who works at the University of Regina or goes to school there can take advantage of this day to pause and to attend virtual events, engage in meaningful conversations with family and friends, and reflect on not only Canada's relationship with Indigenous peoples, but also your individual relationship as a student, staff, faculty, or administrator. You can pick one or two calls to action and think about how to ensure that you are taking concrete steps to respond to it within your sphere of influence on campus. And, our university, our reach is extensive, and we have an opportunity and a responsibility to respond to the calls to action that are relevant to post-secondary. And the very creation of the position that I now hold is a step that shows the University of Regina's commitment to Quaiskastasuan, a commitment to learning how to put things right. Well, everybody should have an opportunity to increase their knowledge and understanding on September 30th and take that date to be able to do that. And I think that's important because everybody in Canada does have a role to play in the journey towards reconciliation or the journey towards putting things right. There are many events occurring for people's learning opportunities. So, for example, locally, the Royal Saskatchewan Museum is hosting a virtual event. And plus, there's so many resources available. So, like, if you haven't read the TRC calls to action, take this time to do it. And I encourage people to read that with your partner, read it with your children, your grandchildren, or over coffee with your friends. And once you've read it, then take the opportunity to pick an action and think about how it is that you can work to address that particular action. And, everybody, again, has a role to play, but we need to take that step. We need to take that next step in order to address the calls to action.